I can still recall the stale coffee smell mixed with that tired, worn-out carpet in the cramped back office they shoved me into no windows. The walls were thin enough to catch every whisper that day. It actually worked in my favor. I was burning the midnight oil again, putting the finishing touches on a predictive pricing model I'd pored over for more than a year, a system designed to calculate freight costs by factoring in real-time demand, fuel price spikes, and supply chain bottlenecks. If it worked, and I was sure it would, it could save Magnus Freight more than $3 million a year. I should have felt proud of that instead. I just felt drained, used. I stood up, stretched my legs, and stepped into the hallway. That's when I heard it. Faint laughter coming from behind the closed door of the executive lounge. My name slipped out like I was just another task on someone's checklist. "As soon as she's done with the code, she's out," said a voice I'd come to despise. Dean, the CEO's son, was chuckling like he was king of the world. "I already promised you, babe," he said. "The minute she hands over that file, you're in easy promotion." I froze without even realizing it, my fists clenched tight. His girlfriend, Laya, a marketing intern with zero coding skills and a glossy Instagram following meanwhile, I'd trained under the CTO, worked double shifts, taught myself Python and R on the side, and now I was being discarded like a broken chair. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. "Don't worry," he added with a smirk I could practically hear through the door. "She's the kind who thinks loyalty means something she won't see this coming." I walked away before I broke something, but deep down, I already knew I'd seen it coming weeks earlier. Ever since Dean came back from business school, full of entitled arrogance and half-baked startup buzzwords, everything shifted. Meetings I used to be part of became executive only. I stopped getting copied on memos. Leia started taking my desk whenever I left for lunch. But hearing him say it out loud, like I was disposable, that hit me hard. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I planned. The next morning, I arrived early. I copied the predictive model onto a secure external drive that I kept locked in a fireproof safe at home. I didn't erase anything from my work laptop. I wanted them to feel safe, to think they had it all. Over the next 2 weeks, I polished the code, meticulously documented every variable, every query, every machine learning weight I'd adjusted by hand. I smiled when Dean stopped by my desk, oozing fake charm and smugness. "How's it going, Sarah?" he asked. "Oh, it's going," I replied, cheerful as ever late one Thursday night. I finished the model, uploaded it, and sent the email subject. Final version, predictive pricing alpha v1. 0. I even threw in some extra notes for clarity, not because I cared, but because that's what makes people think you're still loyal. The next morning, they called me into the glass conference room, the one with too many plants and zero soul. Dean was waiting there, flanked by HR. "I'm afraid we're restructuring," he said, sounding like he'd practiced it 1,000 times. "Your role no longer fits with our vision moving forward." I looked him dead in the eye and smiled. "Good luck," I said calmly. He looked taken aback, almost disappointed, like he expected tears. I stood, thanked HR for the opportunity, and walked out with my head held high. The sunlight hit my face as I stepped outside. It was warm, clean, like a weight had lifted off my shoulders. They thought they'd won. They had no clue what was missing. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. "Hi, this is Carl from Compliance. We're trying to locate a missing module from the predictive pricing system. It seems corrupt or incomplete. Please call us back immediately." I hit play again just to hear the panic in his voice. I leaned back, sipped my tea, and whispered to no one. And so it begins. The voicemail played a third time, and I still didn't tire of it. "Missing module from the predictive pricing system appears to be corrupt or incomplete." I paused it and let the silence settle around me. The thrill wasn't in their panic. It was in the clarity. For once, they were the ones scrambling for the first time in years. I held the upper hand. What they didn't know was that the missing module, the core algorithm powering the entire model, had never been uploaded to their servers. I'd written it separately on my personal laptop, late nights with lo-fi music humming in the background and empty coffee mugs scattered across the desk. The heart of the system, the part that made it worth $3 million, belonged to me. I'd built it off the clock. At home, outside their firewalls and ownership clauses, I could already guess what happened. Dean, or someone on his team, must have tried running the model during a demo, probably in front of some big-name investors. But instead of smooth projections and smart cost simulations, all they got was a mess of null values and broken links. I smirked but didn't respond right away. I waited, because that's what real power looks like, not reacting too fast. By Monday, 3 more calls came through. Then an email from finance, a different domain subject. Urgent. Missing code segments in pricing model. I opened it, curious to see how desperate they'd become. Hi, Sarah. I hope you're well. We're having trouble accessing a specific module within the predictive pricing tool you developed. If you have a moment to help, we'd really appreciate it. This is time-sensitive and could affect several major client meetings this week. I leaned back and let out a quiet laugh. Time-sensitive, they said. They'd tied the launch of this model to a $3 million client renewal contract. What they didn't know was that I'd been reading their quarterly reports for months. I knew how much they depended on this tool to cut costs and prove to investors that Magnus Freight was ready to grow. I knew Dean had told the board the model was fully functional. Revolutionary, if I recall correctly. And they'd bet their next funding round on it. Now their foundation was built on quicksand. Around noon, I got a call from someone unexpected. Margot, the company's senior project manager. I used to respect her, before she turned a blind eye to everything Dean was pulling. Hi, Sarah, she started, trying to sound casual. Listen, I know this might be awkward, but we really need your help. There's a small issue with the model files. Some parts are missing or maybe corrupted. We just want to make sure everything transferred properly. I stayed quiet a moment, then said, That's strange I uploaded exactly what was requested. You did, she rushed to say. We have the upload, but it's just not working the way we expected. That's unfortunate, I replied, but I don't work at Magnus Freight anymore. There was a brief silence. Then she said what I'd been expecting all along. Dean had asked if I might consider consulting for them, just a short-term gig to help fix the mess. Of course, they promised to pay me fairly for my time. That was the first crack in their smug facade, the initial sign their overconfidence was starting to falter. I'll think about it, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. But honestly, my mind was already made up. Later that evening, I pulled up my contract with Magnus Clause 12. Intellectual property just like I remembered. Anything created during company hours on their equipment belonged to them. Still, I'd made sure to protect myself. I checked my Git logs, timestamps, and IP address records. Every important breakthrough happened after 6:30 p.m. Every single update came from my home network. I had screenshots, cloud backups, and even metadata embedded in the original files. Just to be extra safe, I forwarded the whole file structure to my lawyer with a short message. Should they try to claim it? The next morning, I opened LinkedIn, a post I'd shared a few days ago, vague but about ownership, integrity, and the strength in walking away was gaining attention. Over 800 views. Some old colleagues liked it. A recruiter from a logistics tech startup commented, "We should connect." But what grabbed me most was a profile view notification. Dean West, CEO's son. I could almost picture him sweating nervously that afternoon. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Sarah, please, we're in trouble. We need the file. Call me back. Dean. I read it twice, then silenced my phone. They thought they could just toss me aside like I was disposable. But now they were learning the hard way you don't ditch the architect and expect the building to hold. 3 days after Dean's desperate message, an email stopped me mid-sip of my coffee subject. Confidential meeting request. Magnus Freight Board. It came from the executive assistant of Eleanor Riggs. One of the board's most powerful members, Eleanor always seemed sharp, never missed a detail, and never repeated herself. The email was short. Miss Carter, Miss Riggs requests a private video call to discuss a sensitive issue regarding the predictive pricing system. Please confirm your availability at your earliest convenience. This conversation will be off the record unless otherwise specified. I stared at the screen for a full minute. So now the board wanted to talk. Not HR, not Dean, not even his overhyped intern. The board itself, I messaged my lawyer. Just got a call request from the Magnus Freight Board. Should I take it? His reply was instant. Yes, but record the call, and don't commit to anything yet. By noon, I was on the video call dressed in a neat blouse, wearing subtle makeup, and keeping a composed smile. Eleanor Riggs appeared on screen, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. The background was stark. A black wall with the company crest faintly visible in the corner. Miss Carter, she began, calm and precise. Thank you for making time. Of course, I answered. I was interested to hear from you. She skipped any pleasantries. We've been informed the predictive pricing tool your team developed isn't working. The core module appears to be missing or inaccessible. I nodded. That's unfortunate. Her gaze sharpened. Dean West, your former manager, assured us the system was complete before your departure. I let her statement hang for a moment. I delivered everything agreed upon when my contract ended, I said. But if something isn't functioning, I wouldn't know. I haven't been with the company since he terminated my employment. Terminated your contract? She repeated, pausing thoughtfully. Despite your key role developing a tool vital to our next investment phase, I could tell she was piecing it all together. I was informed the company was restructuring, I said, that my position no longer aligned with Magnus's direction. Eleanor sighed quietly. Then came the question I expected. Do you still have access to the core module? I didn't grin, but I didn't flinch either. I created the module on my own time, using my own equipment, I said carefully. I documented everything, all logs, timestamps, and version histories prove it. Would you consider helping Magnus recover the file? That was the dance. They needed me, but they weren't ready to admit it. I'm open to talks, I replied, as long as they're handled professionally and fairly. Understood, she said. We'll be in contact. The call ended abruptly, but I could feel the atmosphere shift. The following day, my phone rang again. This time, it was Jeremy Quinn, Magnus's acting CFO, a numbers guy with less ego and more desperation. Sarah, he said without any introduction, I won't waste your time. We're losing money fast. The East Coast contract we pitched last quarter is hanging by a thread. They expected deliverables, results instead. They got a half-broken interface that can't even generate cost forecasts. I stayed silent. We're facing possible breach of contract penalties if this isn't fixed. Legal is already involved, and Dean, he sighed. Dean isn't handling it well. I almost said good, but kept quiet. I heard you might still have access to the missing parts, he said carefully. If you're willing to come in, even briefly, there's compensation. I glanced at the glass of wine I hadn't touched the night before. I thought about all those late nights, working until 2 a.m., building that module, the quiet humiliation of being fired to make way for someone else's girlfriend. I looked back at the screen and said, I'd consider a licensing agreement, but it would need to go through my lawyer. I don't do free work anymore. There was a pause, then the reply, Please send your terms. I did. With my lawyer's help, we drafted a licensing proposal. market rate plus back pay for work already done. But I added something bold, an attribution clause. Any future use of the module must credit Carter Technologies as the original developer. My name wouldn't be erased. That afternoon, the board met behind closed doors. Dean wasn't invited. Rumors surfaced that Eleanor Riggs ordered an audit of recent executive decisions regarding personnel and projects. Later that evening, I received one last text. "Sarah, I messed up, please. Let's talk. Dean." I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. His chance was gone. By week's end, Magnus Freight went from quietly chaotic to a full-blown public mess. Langford Logistics, their biggest East Coast client, demanded an emergency review call. They weren't interested in excuses, apologies, or vague promises. They demanded a demonstration, and they insisted on speaking directly to the original architect behind the pricing model. When that email hit the Magnus boardroom, it landed like a thunderclap, at least. That's what an old coworker still inside the company told me, sending updates through encrypted messages. The scene was utter chaos. Dean scrambled to bluff his way through, insisting the technology was fully operational and that a new version was in the works. But Langford wasn't buying any of it. They'd already spotted the gaps. They'd tried running the model, or what was left of it, and the results were nothing short of laughable. Data points wiped clean, broken logic loops, entire freight categories missing from the analysis. Magnus had promised gains in efficiency, but instead, they delivered delays and a looming lawsuit. That very afternoon, I got a formal request from Monica Greer, Langford's chief technology officer. "We understand you were the original creator of the core algorithm," her message read. "Would you be open to a private consultation? We want to understand what went wrong and how to fix it." This had stopped being just about revenge. Now it was about salvaging a reputation. I agreed. The next morning we met virtually. Monica was sharp, direct, and refreshingly no nonsense. Within minutes she asked, "Tell me honestly, can the system be fixed without your involvement?" I didn't even hesitate. "Not without rebuilding major parts from scratch. And what they still have is fragile at best." She leaned back and nodded slowly. "That's what I feared. And what about ownership?" "I hold the original source code," I said plainly. "It was all developed on my own equipment, off company time. My lawyer has all the documentation. I'm willing to license the tool, but I'm not handing it over for free." She smiled faintly. "Good. Because we're not looking for free. We're looking for functional." Later that day, Langford gave Magnus an ultimatum. They would grant a 2-week grace period only if the original architect, me, was brought in to oversee the model's completion and deployment. If not, they would terminate the entire contract and go public with the breach. That evening, Eleanor Riggs called me again. "No assistant this time. Miss Carter," she said, her voice cool and controlled. "I want to formally apologize on behalf of the board." I said nothing, just waited. You were let go under circumstances that seem politically motivated and strategically reckless. I allowed myself a quiet sigh of relief. "We're reviewing personnel decisions made by Mr. West and others," she continued. "But meanwhile, the board is willing to accept your licensing terms. We'd also like to discuss a transitional leadership role." I raised an eyebrow. "Leadership?" "Yes," she confirmed. "Langford specifically requested your oversight. The board agrees we want to bring you back as Director of Predictive Systems, reporting directly to the Executive Committee, no involvement from Dean West." The offer was tempting, not because I needed a title, but because it meant they finally recognized me. Still, I wasn't returning blindly. "I'll need full creative control," I said. "My own team, my own project schedule, no interference. And the attribution clause must stay." "Agreed," she said without hesitation. "And Dean, gone. Or I walk." There was a pause, then she said, "Understood." 2 days later, It was official. Magnus issued a statement welcoming me back to oversee Phase 2 of the predictive pricing model. But behind the scenes, something bigger was brewing. The board launched an internal investigation into project mismanagement. Audit trails uncovered a disaster: bloated budgets, misused discretionary funds, and emails revealing Dean had promised my job to his girlfriend months before firing me. One particular message leaked to the board read, "Just let her finish the algorithm. We'll flip her out afterward. Laia can shadow for a week. She'll pick it up." The sheer arrogance was staggering, and now it was unraveling. HR started interviewing employees. Dean stopped showing up to the office. Meanwhile, I walked back into that building with my head held high, laptop in my bag, and my name on the new office door. At first, no one said a word, just quiet nods and averted eyes. A few whispered good luck from people who had watched me leave and were now witnessing my return. But this was no longer luck. It was justice. By the end of my first week back, it was clear the damage ran far deeper than anyone admitted. I wasn't just fixing broken code. I was digging through it, peeling back rushed patches, overwritten functions, and confusing variable names like a forensic analyst at a digital crime scene. With every discovery, one thing became painfully clear. Dean hadn't just fired me. He tried to erase me. He and Laia had gutted the architecture I built, replacing critical modules with shortcut scripts pulled from third-party libraries. No redundancies, no safeguards, no documentation. Worse, someone had tampered with project logs, trying to make it look like Laia contributed to the algorithm. But code doesn't lie. It leaves fingerprints in structure, rhythm, naming conventions, and mine were everywhere. Engineers began stopping by my office, some curious, others quiet. One afternoon, Miguel, a senior developer from another division, came in, closed the door, and sat down without a word. He looked shaken. "You need to know something," he said finally. "Dean told us not to talk to you, said you were toxic, said you'd stolen proprietary work." My stomach tightened, but I stayed silent. Miguel went on. "I didn't believe it, but I was scared. I've got a kid, a mortgage, and Dean, he made people disappear." I nodded slowly. Then he said, "But I kept backups from the original branch you led before they touched it. I have everything, the real file history with your name on every commit." He pulled out a USB and slid it across the desk. I stared at it like it was a loaded weapon, because in a way it was. That same day, Eleanor Riggs called another emergency board meeting. The internal audit had uncovered damning evidence, not only about my firing, but about Dean's entire conduct. He'd approved expense reports for Leia's training trips, which were actually Napa weekends. He authorized hiring bonuses for interns who never showed up. Worst of all, he lied to the board about the model's readiness, fully aware it wasn't functional. At 5:14 p.m., an all-staff email went out. Subject: Leadership Transition Update. Dear team, effective immediately, Dean West is no longer with the company. We thank him for his service and wish him the best in his future endeavors. Classic corporate speak. But behind closed doors, I was told the words were harsher: gross negligence, abuse of power, breach of fiduciary trust. His father, the CEO, had tried to protect him for weeks, but the evidence was overwhelming. By the time Dean was escorted out of the building, he no longer looked like the arrogant, untouchable heir I once knew. As for Laia, she vanished quietly from the employee portal that very evening. No farewell email, no explanation, just gone. I should have felt triumphant. In some ways I did, but the moment that truly struck me wasn't dramatic at all. It happened late one night, alone in my office, as I reviewed the newly refactored model. I hit run, and for the first time in months, the dashboard spat out clean, flawless projections. No errors, no crashes, just smooth, elegant logic. My logic. Leaning back in my chair, I felt a shift deep in my chest. Peace. Not just because I'd proven them wrong, but because I'd proven myself right. All those nights, I doubted myself, thinking I was paranoid, overreacting, unworthy. I'd actually seen the truth. I just hadn't been ready to act until they forced my hand. The next morning, I met with Eleanor to deliver the final working version of the model. "This is brilliant," she said, eyes scanning the numbers. "Langford's going to double their order." "That's good to hear," I replied. "But after this quarter, I'm stepping down." She looked up, surprised. "May I ask why?" I smiled. "Because I've done what I came here to do. I fixed what was broken. Now it's time to build something new. On my terms." She nodded thoughtfully. "And what will that be?" "I'm starting my own firm," I told her. "Consulting, systems design, mentorship. There are a lot of people out there like me, underestimated, overlooked, undervalued. I want to help them rise." 2 weeks later, I walked out of Magnus for the last time. No cardboard box. No HR escort. Just the steady click of my heels on the tile and the heavy, satisfying weight of closure settling on my shoulders. Outside, the sun warmed my face. I flipped my phone over in my hand. A dozen new notifications. Congratulations, press requests, client inquiries. I'd announced the launch of Carter Systems, and the response was already overwhelming. At the top of the list was a message from Monica Greer. "Langford wants you as our lead systems advisor. Let's build the future." I smiled to myself. They thought they'd erased me. But I wasn't just a line of code in their system. I was the architect of my own, and I had just gone live.